Welcome back to Biohacking Beauty. Today, we're diving into a topic that's rarely discussed but plays a huge role in how your skin ages, which is the skin brain axis. Your skin isn't just a passive barrier. We actually speak about that quite a bit. Um, but today we're going to talk about how it's a dynamic organ that's constantly communicating with our brain, whether it is responding to stress, inflammation, any really outside stimuli, even light exposure. This conversation was originally recorded on the Smarter Not Harder podcast with Dr. Scott Scherr, who's a leading obviously was interviews a few times on this podcast. He's a leading expert in health optimization and longevity, one of the OGs of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Actually, together we break down how neurological stress, circadian rhythms, and even your skin's microbiome influence aging at a cellular level. So, if you've ever wondered why your skin reacts to emotional stress or why some people age faster than others, this episode is packed with insights you really don't want to miss. Dr. Scott Scherr is, as I said, the host of the Smarter Not Harder podcast and also a physician specializing in health optimization. I mentioned hyperbaric oxygen therapy and, in general, longevity medicine. As the founder of integrative HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and a leading expert in performance medicine, he helps individuals leverage cutting edge science to enhance vitality, slow aging, and optimize brain and body function. A side note, if you ever see biohackers with blue tongue, it is because of a company he co founded called Troscriptions. And really, he started the methylene blue craze. In any case, I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. So let's dive into it.
All right. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Great. Great to see you, Scott.
It's been too long. And Amitai, tell me how I say your name perfectly as an Israeli, because I'm really bad at I should know this.
But why? The question is why? Why do you want to know how to say my name?
Well, because people mess up my name all the time too, and I feel like I should say your name appropriately.
Oh, your last name maybe.
My last name all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amitai is in Hebrew.
Yes.
But it's the same way, Anastasia in America, my wife, is Anastasia. That's not how you say her name in Russian. It's Anastasia. By the way, in Hebrew, it's called Anastasia, and I call her Anastasia, which is even, But yeah, so my name is Amitai. To be honest,
you respond to most anything.
If someone knows my name, I'm already flattered.
Yeah, me too. That's how I feel. So especially my last name, which is very difficult for people to say, to spell, all of those things. But but dude, it's been really great to know you for the last several years, and I'm such a big fan of you, your wife, your company. But what I love about you and the work that you do is that you're really great at educating. So I want to bring you on today and talk about a topic that I don't actually know that much about, and it's because nobody thinks about their skin until they need to think about their skin, right? Yeah. Probably around my age, right? When things start changing and you're like, oh, look at these wrinkles in my face. What the hell is that, right? Or, my frown lines because I was told I shouldn't wear sunglasses because I need all that sunlight into my eyes and everything like that. So where I wanted to go and start with you today is something that's very aligned with the work that we do at our nonprofit, which is talking about skin aging. Mm-hmm. But even before that, I wanted to talk about something that's not very well known. It's something called the skin-brain axis. So I'd love you to tell us what this is and why it's important, my friend.
So first of all, the skin, we say like, oh, the skin's the largest organ in the body, which I would actually argue against. It is not.
Okay, what is that? What
lymphatic
is
system.
lymphatic system? Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard it's
But
argued like your skeletal system is bigger. I've heard that your gut is bigger. Like, everybody kind of argues about this.
yeah, I don't know if you could call the entire biomass like of microbiome of microbiota in your body like one system, it would be the biggest, right? So
Yeah.
like, but the skin is very interesting because it's not really a one function that we have kind of a unit striving towards. Like if you think of your liver, yeah, you could argue that there are some differentiation of cell types, but it is dedicated towards one function. Whereas the skin really isn't, even within epithelial cells or whatever, like they are not serving the same role if they're located in different areas. But in general, we have anything from pigment producing cells to collagen or fiber producing cells, fibroblasts, right? To cells that are part of our immune system, etc., etc., etc. So the first thing that we need to realize that this is an organ that has a lot of moving parts, no pun intended. And one of the really, really cool things that, we can talk about like, evolution or biology, but one of the cool things that this organ, let's call it like that, does is that it relays information from the environment directly to our brain. Very similar to other kind of avant-garde organs that we have, such as our eyes or our smell receptors,
Sure. Yeah.
or taste receptors, etc. So the skin actually has, whether it is immunological responses, it can relay back to the brain. It can relay even light. This is controversial. There is sufficient evidence to assume that it can also relay, activation of what we call opsins, which are like these light receptors, and how they kind of relay back to the brain.
Yeah, that's controversial, right? Because some people will say, like, if you have a dark mask like that you're wearing at night, that's fine. But there is some controversy that you have skin receptors that can actually tell people to wake up in the morning or to stay awake at night if they have too much bright light exposure.
Yes, and I think it's controversial because the studies suck. Like the studies showing that you actually do disrupt your circadian rhythm if you are in a bright room, but you are sleeping like with a mask, and it shows that it disrupts your circadian rhythm. They're really poorly conducted. The contention is not a binary contention. It's more of a contention around how did you get to that conclusion.
Right.
But what we do know are that the skin has its own circadian rhythm it follows, and that it at least gets input from the brain to its local circadian rhythm, but also that the skin is involved in larger processes of modulating our brain's behavior. Some of them are temperature, obviously.
Sure, temperature, yeah.
Temperature, pressure, but also damage, so inflammation.
Of course, yeah.
And one of the things that we know is that, and by the way, now we know also, certain types of bacteria that are prevalent in like mold and stuff like that. They can actually communicate with the brain through our skin, etc. So our brain really has a highway called the skin brain axis that communicates directly with a hypothalamic adrenal pituitary axis, the HPA axis.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, it's a stress relaying system where this system can be hijacked. When I say hijacked, the problem I have with that word is that word infers like top-down processes. And by the way, in physiology, top-down means brain down. But what I mean top-down, I mean predetermined or premeditated action by something, which then so top-down in physics or in any type of like man-made or man-initiated endeavor, architecture would be we have a plan and then something follows that plan. Whereas a bottom up would be how a mound of ant mound is built, right? So that's what I mean.
So you mean top down, sort of like the brain sort of directed versus, sort of systemically directed otherwise, right?
What I mean that I have a problem with hijacked is that I don't mean brain directed. I actually mean hijacked infers that the skin is trying to hijack.
Oh, I see.
But it's actually not that, or cells try to hijack. But what happens is that mainly through aging, so senescent cells, for example, would be like a poignant point here. we communicate the incorrect signals back to the brain.
I see. Okay. This is what you mean by hijacked. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But so it's not like someone is trying to do that. It's a bottom up process. Like senescent cells, for example, release secretory phenotypes of senescence.
Right.
And those actually can travel and get to our HPA axis. Therefore, on the short term, causing more stress through that axis, so more catecholamines or stress molecules that are being expressed. But on the long run, they can also actually disrupt its function, cause senescence there.
So the senescent cells in the skin are causing a stress response?
Yes, they cause a stress response. And this is a really, really, really cool series of studies. But really, there is one study that is, I would determine, as interesting from Lisbon, from the University of Lisbon in Portugal.
Okay.
Which is really like, it's an interesting read. It's called something to the extent of like the skin is a driver of whole body aging. But yeah, I would really urge people to read it.
Sounds
and
interesting.
some other things that then kind of when I started, I said, oh, you have other cells there. So but you also affect senescence in the cells that relay immunological responses. They're very susceptible for senescence, and apparently the most susceptible are your pigment producing, your melanocytes, your pigment producing cells. To the extent that they have their own secretory phenotype, you can actually, that have a name that you can actually measure.
That's really interesting. So the melanocytes themselves are more susceptible to senescence than other types of cells in the skin itself. But at the same time, you're saying that senescent cells in the skin of different types, and I'm sure there's different types of cells that can become senescent, can then relay information to this, this brain axis, the HPA axis, and potentially cause maybe a cycle of senescence that occurs even systemically, internally, that's not even sort of, quote unquote related, although it's separate or directly related to the skin aging that's happening, kind of thing. I'm sure, and probably happen the other way too, I would imagine, right? Is it bidirectional, right? So
yeah, it's not only bidirectional. Like I would even we can go through first principles and just like say your skin relies on like VEG1 as far as like or like the ability to renew blood vessels, right?
Right, blood vessels. Yep.
Yeah. So if you don't have proper angiogenesis, which by the and I don't want to mention the C word, but that is like there are things here.
Cancer?
Cancer, yes.
Yeah, you can say anything here. That's fine.
If you don't have good proper angiogenesis or again hijacked angiogenesis, disrupted, we can definitely talk about how things go wrong. But in the skin specifically, if you don't have proper angiogenesis, the skin is going to not have the building blocks, or even, we talk about like NAD or other cofactors which catalyze the repair of DNA, which then would drive more aging, more senescence. And that's just like one thing. We didn't mention the ability to detoxify. Like there are many things that our skin relies on as far as like how our body ages, which then relates to the skin.
Yeah, one thing that I was hearing you speak about recently was moisture in the skin, because people think of moisture as something that has to come from outside. But talk about how the skin moisturizes itself, how it keeps itself. Because it sounds like it's not really an outside process; it's more like an internal job, right?
It is an internal job to the extent that there is no such thing actually as hydration that comes from the outside. It actually is a non-existent term, and the reason is because hydration is actually bound pretty tightly around hydrogen, but it's a hydrogen-bound basically molecules, water, fat molecules, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is that we are unable to create this process from the outside. It is only driven from the blood supply and intracellular processes. What we can do from the outside. Yeah. And that's why, by the way, I say if you like hyaluronic acid, you like the idea of that humectant that is a silver bullet for hydration. This is actually a pretty interesting topic on its own, how this molecule has become popular because of a process that has nothing to do with the way we apply it on the skin. Nothing, zero. But if you apply it on your skin, it's not going to give you any moisture whatsoever. What it can do to some extent, but other molecules could do as well, if not even better, it can be an occlusive. It means it could prevent the sharing of moisture between the skin and the air, something called so that it kind of disrupts this gradient, right? And
Got
that
it.
is called the transepidermal water loss.
Got it.
So the best way to think of a gradient is we're going to meet each other in Vegas in December,
Yeah. Yeah.
and our lips are going to immediately shrivel up, like immediately be the
Well, for you,
driest
I
thing.
live in Colorado, man, so it's just
Okay,
as
okay,
dry.
okay,
But
okay.
that's what I was thinking. So something that prevented water loss could be very helpful in a place that it's extremely dry. Then, but
Yes,
but if we
but
want to, yeah, go
but
ahead.
I'll give you an example of where this understanding has like there's a glitch in the matrix in people's understanding, and an entire industry is born out of it. Is the use of oils as as hydrators.
Mm,
So oils in general are really normally, obviously it's a blanket statement, but they're really poor hydrators. They're really
of course,
poor
yeah,
for occlusion. They are good for suppleness, right? But not to prevent transepidermal water loss. And people, there is a whole large industry now around beef tallow applied on the skin, whether it's okay or not. Okay, it is not a good occlusive ingredient.
right,
So that's just like a point about hydration. Hydration actually comes from the inside. It is generated from what we consume, etc. Even, by the way, our own skin barrier is generated by what we consume. I'm not a big anti omega 6 guy, respect to those who are, but obviously lipid
peroxidase.
peroxidization,
Yep,
yeah, is a negative thing as far as like many things, but also
sure,
creating a sound skin barrier.
right. So you have omega sixes and you have omega threes, right? But if you have an excess in either of them, it's going to cause this lipid peroxidation, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's something that's thrown around a lot, like in like sort of the anti-aging circles, called advanced glycation end products. Um, Can you talk about those? Because oftentimes those are thought about as sort of manifesting in the skin and as a way that we see skin aging in general.
Well, they are unstable molecules. They are called they have the best name. Whoever did the marketing for anti-advanced glycation end products is the best person in the world, because their acronym is literally AGE.
Yep. Yeah.
AGE.
Yeah. It's easy. Yeah.
Uh, Easy, but really they're unstable molecules that look to adhere to proteins.
Right.
So it would be a problem in many places, whether it is your gut, your connective tissues of sorts, etc. But these are caused by the metabolism of glucose. And basically, they are considered the 13th hallmark of aging.
Mm-hmm.
And in the skin specifically, they change the same way. It's not the same way, but in the same heuristic way that you have iron, but then you have oxidized iron, right? Like you have iron with an oxygen molecule attached to it, and we see a completely different substance there.
Mm-hmm.
When AGE is attached to proteins such as collagen, but actually mainly elastin,
Mm-hmm.
they make this protein rigid in the case of collagen, so it's more brittle. And in the case of elastin, we see really something very, very unique, where elastin fibers need to shear on top of each other.
Mm.
They need to basically be slippery, if you would. And a couple of processes happen in aging skin. One of them is the polarization shift of they become from hydrophobic to hydrophilic, their membrane, but also AGEs basically make them sticky.
Mm.
And you get a skin that doesn't move the same. It doesn't move the same as it used to. And we all know the pinch test. The pinch test, where you pinch your skin,
Yep.
how fast it bounces back, is more about that relationship rather the abundance or lack of collagen.
It's
But
not a
also
hydration thing too. It's not a hydration thing as well, as far as
that would be, some of it would be hydration for
yeah.
sure. So the speed of which the skin bounces back is mainly so if you're over 50, you're going to have a slower bouncing of the skin back. We can also kind of squint very hard and see how long it takes our skin to like delete those little wrinkles we created. But that is mainly through these two, mainly through elastin and its malfunction.
Okay. So when we're talking about the advanced glycation end products are great. I agree. It's like the age thing. It's very easy for people to remember. But I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you was, so give the evolutionary history. Why, as far as our like reproductive vitality and what changes with our skin as we get older, and why does it change in the sense of priorities and other aspects as we do get older?
So, and that is, so I would love to get into the hormonal shifts that happen, but I think in the beginning it's just important to understand the conceptual idea of what our skin is and what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So
please.
The skin, for most skin and let's say whatever's on it, like fur for animals, what it needs to do for any other animal that really dies very, very quickly after it reached the inability to reproduce, the skin and fur needs to communicate vitality and virality and the ability to have healthy offsprings and obviously take care of them and provide for them. So that is a communication, a not only communication inwards, but it is a communication outwards organ.
So for mates, basically, we're talking about, right?
For mating, yes. So you can think of the selfish gene, you can think of whatever you want that would make sense to you. But that is the main outcome of a healthy system. The main outcome for a healthy system, the same way where we feel that abundance is a social status, because when we lived in caves, most of the time we had to take care of feeding ourselves right now. And if we had free time to make, bead necklaces or whatever, it
rock
meant
wall paintings. Yeah.
Exactly. It meant that we have more time than we know what to do with.
Right.
The same way, a skin that is healthy literally means that everything else, for the most part, obviously, is in check, because, or else we would not have these extra ability to repair everything in the skin, etc., which gets damaged all the time. Another thing, by the way, that we can consider is whatever turns over faster in the body requires more maintenance. The skin obviously turns over in a younger person every 14 to 21 days.
So that extends and that gets less, it turns over longer as we get older?
Yes.
Interesting.
I wanted to get back to it later, but I just wanted to give an idea of how fast cells turnover in the skin.
Yeah, sure.
When we grow older, and this is something very unique to humans, turtles, elephants, whatever, when we grow older and we pass the ability to reproduce, our skin needed to kind of reinvent itself, because there is still an evolutionary need for us, or else we wouldn't survive. It is the evolutionary need of passing on the information outwards or onwards. But as you know, we don't need to look good to do that. Maybe in the modern world you do, because you need to be impressive and part of it is looking young, etc. But historically, being old does not diminish your ability to voice your opinion.
Right. We know this very well in our culture. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, it gives you more reason to have no filters at all on what you're going to express. Anyway, so continue. Yes.
Yeah. And it depends on where in the United States and the world this opinion might be considered more valuable or less valuable.
Indeed.
Depends where you are.
In the eye of the beholder. Yeah.
Exactly, quite literally. And now we get to the point where, so what happens to our skin? So our skin becomes less and less of a communicative organ, and a lot of processes flip and they become preservation processes. So we see anything from DNA repair to, as we said, the cycle of which our cells renew themselves, the amount of mitochondria per cell. So we normally think of mitochondrial decline or mitochondrial dysfunction as, I think of it like that. You have a car, you have an engine. How well does the engine work, right? But really, mitochondria numerous within one cell. It's like many engines.
Yes. I talk about this all the time. Yes. So I didn't realize in the skin cells, the mitochondria density is that the number goes down over time too.
Yeah. It doesn't happen only in the skin, but it is very common and replicable, predictable, etc. in the skin. For reference, one of the things that red light therapy does that's supposed to be good for you and things like that is the hormetic stress of actually increasing the mitochondrial density over time. And obviously that is again debatable, but it should do that, let's say it like that. And we know it in fat cells as well, etc. Now, what the skin needs to do now is to preserve the entire organism. So think of a preservation kind of forward agent. First of all, you don't want to take a lot of resources from the environment, right? One of them, obviously, we know that it takes energy to make energy. And we also know that the more mitochondria we have, we're going to have statistically more elongated mitochondria, we're going to have more electron spillage, etc. So we minimize that. We also create a bigger layer of dead cells, or basically a callus, you can imagine, on top of your skin. So the density between the hypodermis, dermis, and epidermis changes. You have more epidermis, and you have less dermis. We shed skin slower.
Okay.
And that slower shedding of the skin does many things aside from thickening the epidermis on the account of the dermis. It makes you also less susceptible to things like bruising, etc. within this paradigm. Things go wrong a little bit after that in ages that our skin didn't think we're gonna get to, but it does prevent a lot of reactions to the environment, damage to different not only specifically in the skin, but like elbows, knees, areas that are in more contact with like sharp objects or whatever.
Sure.
So there is a completely morphing of what this product of our body needs to do. We can even see it in the microbiome, where I heard Dr. Zach Bush talk about the skin microbiome as an opportunity for diversity. But I understand why he's saying that. It's because he's understanding the gut microbiome. But actually in the skin, it is not the case.
Right.
Especially not the case as we grow older, where we actually do not want, we want dominance of very, very specific strains of bacteria. So the skin completely, as I said, completely morphs from a communicative organ outwards to a blockage, or to a damage preventing organ, or to a preservative organ, if I would.
Makes sense. Yeah, I totally understand. So it's basically trying to protect you from injury, protect you from dying in various ways, and definitely care about what you look like anymore. So that's why you can look at these sort of native tribes, the elders in these tribes with like huge amounts of, wrinkles or whatever. And that's actually, it's like a sign of being wise in some of these older cultures for one of those reasons at least. So the dermis gets smaller and the epidermis gets larger. And that's because there's less turnover of the epidermis over time. Is that why? And then as a result, it just sort of like as a ratio, the epidermis goes up and then the dermis goes down, that kind of thing?
Yes. But also different, by the way, like for example, like cortisol is increasing the shedding of skin layers, for example.
Okay.
Or expression of mitochondrial heat, or CoQ10 as another coenzyme. All of those have a direct correlation with the ability to shed skin.
So cortisol going up increases turnover or decreases turnover?
It actually increases turnover, but it also increases MMPs. Okay. Especially MMP allows the shedding of skin, or increases the shedding of skin, because it actually breaks down the bonds between skin layers, or collagen, or things like that. So we think of it as a negative thing. We think of it as something that would degrade collagen and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
But I remind you that that is exactly kind of the double-edged sword we're talking about here.
Gotcha. And then when it comes to excess heat, is that because the mitochondria in the skin are just less efficient overall, and as a result, you just sort of spill more heat, that kind of thing?
Not only that, it's also the limited blood circulation to the skin, which then just on average lowers a bit the temperature of the skin. But so we think of many different small changes that lead to increase of effects over time, but they are all, it's like a symphony. We didn't even talk about like estrogen or
I wanted to get there. Your hormones, right? There's what's going on with the hormones. But just one question before we get there is on, you mentioned the bacterial strains. This is interesting to me because I've worked in hospitals for a long time, right? And the most common things that we see, of course, are going to be staph and strep, right? And various types of staph and strep. You mentioned that diversity is not as important and can be more dangerous as you get older. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that's really not well understood by a lot of people. Like, we have bacteria on our skin all the time, right? And this changes as we age. What's the story there?
So first of all, the faster turnover we have and the more skin shedding, we can accommodate different types of bacteria that might not be positive to us.
Makes
As
sense.
we grow older, that's number one. Number two,
Yeah.
there's something that I coined, and now actually a baby that has run away from me completely is leaky skin. Like someone told it to me on a podcast like a month ago.
Okay.
I was like, oh, great, fantastic. But leaky skin, when I started talking about it, I don't know, a decade ago, I did not actually mean the tightness of junctions the same way you're going to have it in your gut. It would be leakage of information.
So different type of leakage here. Leakage is such a terrible word, but anyway, so keep going.
The worst word you can imagine.
Oh man, that's terrible. Babies and adults and elder. Anyway, so keep going with leakage, please. Let's talk more leakage.
The slow dripping of something. Anyway, the leakage of information, whether through something called quorum sensing. Mm-hmm. So quorum sensing is I'll even give like a Nostradamus type prediction here, which is one of the things that is going to be the hottest topic in skincare in the next 10 years, is something called postbiotics, which postbiotics are really the communication or the end results of bacterial metabolism. So you're going to have the same way you have, I call it the bacterial exosomes, like the same way you're going to have a exosome used, or even inflammatory cytokines used in order to awaken some repair process in the body. Mm-hmm. We can trigger specific things in the skin through using those postbiotics, and we use them. Many companies use them.
What's an example? What's an example of a postbiotic for the skin?
Like a lactobacillus postbiotic, where we would have basically a inoculated bacteria, but we're going to leave the ability of that bacteria to be sensed, for example. Or obviously, you can take a Microbiome Labs pill that has spores. Yeah. These spores, you might think that they're becoming bacteria in the skin, but most of what they do is the quorum sensing of those spores is going to trigger different processes in the skin.
Right. So then I think, maybe just defining what quorum sensing is for people that maybe not know what that is, because that's a very interesting concept. And we think about this in lots of different systemic areas in our body. But what does it mean when it comes to the skin itself?
Quorum sensing is the sensing of different bacteria to their environment. But really, I would like you to think of it as the load, the ability to understand load, because obviously there is.
Do you mean load by quantity? You mean as far as the quantity?
Yeah.
Okay, not quantity. Not like a physical load, but
not a physical load, but the information load, if you would. I need to know whether I will procreate, whether I'll hunker down and try to preserve myself, whether I will express actually oxygen singlets that would kill me, but also kill bacteria around me. But I will offset the load there that it would benefit my neighboring bacteria that I'm in sympathetic action with. So there are things that you can do in affecting the type of bacteria and the different type of bacteria in your skin, not necessarily through introducing more bacteria, which is what we're really accustomed to think of. Whether it is correct or not, that is not in my argument to win whatsoever. But we can affect them by giving them hints as to
right. And that's the idea of using, but giving them a direction, right? Giving them a sort of a window into the world where we want things to go by urging colonies and urging different types of bacteria to kind of shift in certain ways. And we do this all the time in the gut. And as you know, you can use postbiotics in the gut as these products of metabolism from the bacteria themselves. And butyrate is a very common one, of course. Everybody's probably heard of that. And so you're saying
obviously,
that
obviously MitoPure, by the way, that's what it is. Like the urolithin A craze, whether it is driven by Monsanto or not, again, not for me to say, because they own it now.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not for they own Nestle and Nestle on them. Not for me to say at all, although I did say it. But it's a very smart approach. I would say within that approach, I think it's important to know, even though we use postbiotics, etc., is that the grand hopes of postbiotics for now, they are not realized. So the grand hopes of introducing athletics, the best athletes in the world's fecal matter back into the gut through inoculated bacteria. So, basically poop supplements.
Yeah, poop supplements. Yeah.
They don't seem to work.
Yeah, it seems
that well.
yeah, they don't work that well at all.
Yeah.
But so we're not talking about spreading poop on the skin here, everybody. We're talking about the gut, just to
Yes,
be clear.
yes, yes,
But when
yes.
it comes to, I don't think you're doing that, and none of the skin companies have. If you start talking about it, maybe it'll actually start catching on, even if you don't do it as a company. So just
I
think
should
about
I
that.
should I should start talking about it and not do it. That would be the
Exactly.
best thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to the strains of bacteria, and obviously we're talking about quorum sensing, being able to shift these, like what is like, I didn't actually know that until now, that because the turnover is higher when we're younger, we can tolerate more strains. But as
Hmm.
we're older, because the turnover is less for all the reasons we've mentioned and more, you can't tolerate that. So like, what are the main ones that
So
are usually there? Yeah.
before I tell you this, let me
Yeah.
ask you a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
When are people more susceptible to drastic shifts in their gut microbiome?
Well, usually when they're
We'll
stressed,
start there.
usually when they're
Oh,
stressed.
yes, for sure
Yeah.
when they're stressed. But I meant
Yeah.
like age-wise. When would that be? And there are two ages. It's a little hint there, but
Yeah, I mean, you would think it during like rapid development, you'd think that there would be a potential there. And then
mhm.
that's when like going through puberty. And then you'd think of, at least in women when they had a major hormonal shift, right? Which would
Mhm.
be in like menopause, but it would, and then maybe in men, it might be more indolent because our, andropause or our hormonal declines are more gradual
Actually,
for the
we're going to get
most
to it
part.
when we talk about different stuff in the skin. But yes, you're correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the things that you've mentioned is basically different scenarios, but that cause the same level of stress in the organism that actually causes the organism to try to perform in high RPMs, basically.
Right. Right.
And that within the factor of quorum sensing will allow your cells to respond a little bit better to those stressors.
Mm,
What happens when we grow older is that the skin is in a lower RPM, and therefore the shift over time is not responded well to. So the skin statistically just needs to lower the amount of risk that it has. Now, you asked me about, just as an anecdote, but you asked me about like specific strains that show to improve skin health over time. The Saccharomyces cerevisiae probably is the most effective one.
mm,
And the reason I'm not mentioning more is that the other ones are patented and normally are pretty flimsy as far as science.
got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My point really was that, and I think it was just because I know mostly staph and strep, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't know if there's any other bugs that were more prominent on the skin specifically. Now, in the sense of what might be
Yeah.
helpful to the skin, that's different, right? And that sounds like
No.
maybe we
So
kind of
there are
yeah.
A. acne and P. acne bacteria that are more prevalent in oily skin. They can survive there more,
Right.
and that is another thing that lowers with age. Obviously, the oiliness of the skin. That's another way for the skin to kind of starve them out. But
Got it.
I understand
Interesting.
your question. What I think is very interesting here is that as far as like the skin being healthy, we actually know the less the diversity, the better.
So interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think that's really where I was kind of trying to hammer that point, because that's very unlike what we think about with the gut. We think that more diversity is good, although that may not always be the case anymore, even with the gut, because if you live in a Western country and you have a massively diverse ecosystem, it may not be as awesome as we think it used to be as well. So that's changing, I think. But when it comes down to like the hormonal shifts, let's talk about that, because I know that was kind of a big part. You mentioned a little bit about estrogen and progesterone. There's a testosterone piece here. What, as far as aging goes, how does this reflect on our skin, and how do you think about it?
It actually directly, again, and the question is, I think you can always be a 5-year-old and ask, but why, to everything that I'm going to say, which is great. But so I'll start like very broadly. They are the catalysts of collagen production in our skin, and elastin of our fibroblasts basically in our skin. So whether it is estrogen in women and testosterone in men. And since, as you mentioned, our decline is more mild or more sustained over time rather than sharp instances of decline for
Yeah.
women. For women, it is actually known, and obviously it changes, but the statistics are there's a crazy decline in collagen somewhere around the ages of like 39, 40, and another crazy decline around age 50,
Okay.
because that is where the two areas where we're having basically like perimenopause and menopause.
Mhm.
And obviously it changes, but that is a statistic. But what it means is that men, as we grow older, start to have a larger and larger collagen difference between men and women, to the extent that at age 50 it's 25% different. Like you have
Okay.
25% more collagen as a man than you would have as a woman.
This is just from from estrogen decline in general, or is this
Yes,
from
yes,
okay.
from
Yeah.
estrogen decline.
Okay.
Obviously, there are other things that are happening there. Men in general express more building blocks for connective tissue. There is a gene called LUM that encodes lumicans, and lumicans are, I call them like collagen bricklayers, and they are very important to kind of prevent scarring or the adhesion. So we also have a higher expression of those, just beside the point. But yeah, these androgens basically allow men to create more collagen than women
Okay.
as time goes on,
Got
and
it.
the decline of them plays a role in the decline of collagen
Got it.
and
So
elastin.
and elastin as well. So these hormones are shifting, our collagen production is going down. Life is getting less about procreation and more about being wise and being outspoken, if you're part of our culture, of course. So one question I want to ask you, like how, I know that you're really interested in skin aging and actually measuring this and looking at this from a more of a holistic perspective. Where are we with like looking at skin aging and understanding how we can reverse this over time by using various interventions?
That's a great question. But there are two things that have very little to do with each other,
Okay.
but people think that they're the same thing. And one is the appearance of aging, and the other is literal skin aging. And I hope I make myself clear.
Yes, please. Yeah.
And by the way, the appearance of aging does not exist only in the skin. So there is a famous study of like elevating or supplementing with growth hormone and reversing the biological age by 6 months. You did not. You reversed the appearance of aging where you tested. The aging, the Horvath clock did not shift or whatever, right? And that is, I think, very important to understand. So to answer your first question, obviously we have things like the lowest hanging fruit there is like Botox and stuff like that. They make you look younger. And within those, actually advancement is happening where the neurotoxins that people use last longer, they are tolerated by the tissue more. There is the science of fillers, which add volume because volume is lost with time. These are not recommended in general. By the way, this is what I alluded to when I say hyaluronic acid as a skincare product got popular because of something that it didn't do. So when you inject fillers or place, if you are older, fillers in the skin, they are normally based on hyaluronic acid, but this is cross-linked hyaluronic acid, which means it provides rigidity. The hyaluronic acid that we have in our skin is non-cross-linked, even though it's called the same thing. It's completely different. So there is some science there as well. The problem with fillers is that they actually, because it is bioidentical, it actually morphs into the tissue and causes kind of a gelatin type looking tissue to kind of fuse into that collagen filler. And that's what we know now, that fillers don't kind of go out of your body after a while or get metabolized. A lot of them stay and morph into the tissue and cause a tissue that doesn't have vascularization, etc. Like it's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah.
This is like lowest hanging fruit. As far as like other appearance of aging, we definitely can create a balance between the ability of the skin to repair itself and the stimulation of repair. That is how you cause a tissue that looks better. The problem with that is that our skin is only the outermost layer within the structure that makes us look better. There's also subcutaneous tissue, muscles, etc. And devices that they're attempting to make us look better, they're either going to try to delete, in other words, marks that are close to the surface, whether it is pigmentation or scarring or things like that, or they're going to try and thicken the underlying tissue, mainly the collagen tissue, but not necessarily, not only. There, it doesn't exist, okay? Any type of procedure which is going to use waves to heat up subdermal tissue and therefore increase the volume, it does it by morphing that tissue into scar tissue.
Okay.
The first thing is, and I'm talking to the people who are obviously like educated by those companies, but I'm talking to people who are supposed to know what they're doing. and they claim, well, I'm using it at a low frequency, and I do this and I do that. No, my friend, you are there. It really does not exist. It's either we create scar tissue, which, by the
Mm,
way, isn't that thick. What is thick in the beginning is the inflamed tissue. That's when we
mm,
see a lot of difference. When
right.
that kind of resolves into scarring, the results are actually pretty mild and disappointing to the patient.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they go to do more of those. So it is like trying to resolve a headache with pain somewhere else, or hitting yourself,
In
or
another location.
with emotion, trying to resolve emotional pain with physical pain, whatever you want to call that. There is no,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really a silly thing that has been marketed so well. It's insane.
Wow. Yeah. So one question there just I have is that, like, hypothetically, in a hypothetical situation, if you could improve somebody's skin age, like really, like, if you were able to really measure this, like, would it actually show benefits into the actual age that people think you are, right? Because I understand that they're different, right? Or is it not really that's possible? It's a two different. This doesn't even correlate as far as you guys can tell.
So we do that. Like, we can show the increase of the genes that are associated with aging, which some of them I mentioned, like LUM or HAS, which is the hyaluronic acid expression gene, or different collagen genes, or whatever, like 14 different genes that we've measured. Yeah, we can show
Awesome.
a difference of up to 20 years. But we had very hard time like showing a difference within that study, showing a difference without incorporating something that would stimulate repair. Because at the
Okay.
end of the day, think of a college of a wrinkle, or scar, or hyperpigmented area, or anything really. It is a remnant of a process that has been resolved.
True. Very true. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to re-break that bone. Basically, you can imagine, like,
Ah,
it literally is the same as asking me, "Hey, I have this finger. I can't point up. It actually is going to point left, or whatever. I
right. So
broke
you have
it.
to re-break it. Yeah.
How much wellness do I need to do in order for it to
I get it. I get it.
repair?"
So you have to create a stress to be able to create that repair. So what are like the top 3 to 5 ways that you would do that from your perspective, from like the repair side of things?
So probably microneedling is the best and the easiest way to do that.
Okay.
It's controllable. It doesn't have any like damage that is thermal,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So that to me is my kind of favorite way. You could also stress the fascia, so you could do different types of like massages and stuff like that. Some people would not like that I say that. It is very limited, but mainly to challenge adhesions and things like that. It actually is extremely important. So like facial massages, stuff like that. Another way to challenge fascia is by doing like kinesiological taping on the face.
Taping on the face. Interesting.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
it's
This must be fun. Have you done this? I want to see pictures. So.
Anastasia's doing it. We're actually trying to infuse peptides into the tape and stuff like that.
Nice.
There's, to be honest with you, even though it's a cool idea, you should just use skincare and use the tape. Like, there's a limit to how much you can infuse into a tape. So yeah, that is another great way. Lasers to a tolerable degree, which is like once every 6 months, to once every 5 years. I would say, like, if you really ask me, it's once every 5 years. But obviously, people want a quick fix, so lasers are great. And I would say within the category of lasers, because that's number 4, I would also say chemical peels. I would say the same kind of category as far as like what you're targeting. And with that, we actually can infuse the peptide that matters, GHKCU, copper peptide.
So when you do the peel, it gives you a higher absorption?
Yeah, we actually have a peel that contains GHKCU in it.
Got it. Okay.
And
shows
that
you
is
about peels. Okay. Cool.
that is no. Listen, this is pretty crazy because it's a level of acidity that estheticians in the beginning kind of go, "Oh my God, you want me to use a product that's that strong?" But after that, they call us and say, "So this guy didn't peel at all. Why?" And basically, they do, but it is in much smaller quantities. As far as like, it's less apparent because it's not in big like blocks that people rip off their face. Anyway, so that is good. And number 5, I would say, is introducing more inflammatory cytokines. So these can be in exosomes, they can be in a PRF, platelet-rich fibrin, but really these days more affordable is just like injecting inflammatory cytokines or introducing them. It's kind of It's called like, it's the same like as a vampire facial where you have
Yeah, that's
microneedles
what
and
I was
then,
thinking. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We have the hyperbaric facial now. Like you get it, the PRP, and then you go into the hyperbaric chamber and that kind of thing. So I've seen that as well. It's the same kind of idea overall. Gotcha.
So I would say something about the hyperbaric facial.
Yeah.
The problem of the skin as it grows older is not the presence of oxygen, it is the cost of utilization of oxygen.
The cost. Okay.
The
So it's the
cost.
oxidative load. Yeah.
It is the oxidative load, very similar to what you would find in hyperbarics, probably in many tissues of the body,
Yep.
with different people, obviously.
Of course.
But in
Yeah.
the skin, it could be devoid from it. You could have a very healthy person, but as time goes on, there is less ability to handle that oxidative load.
Got it.
What you could do many things. We had a product which we made in the beginning only for that.
Right. The hyperbaric mask. I remember.
Yeah, which now it's just a product. Like people use it just in general, but that's one thing you could do. You could actually, I'm going to tell you another thing that's pretty cool. You can take a quarter of a Just Blue troche,
Okay.
dissolve it in 180 ml of reverse osmosis water,
Okay.
and spray a few sprays on the skin before going into the hyperbaric chamber.
So that's so you're going to protect it from the oxidative load itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I've been using obviously internal for a long time as far as the methylene blue to protect, but I hadn't thought about from the skin perspective specifically, which is important. And because it sounds like the skin might be even more sort of imbalanced over time with its ability to make energy versus its ability to detoxify from energy metabolism is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, dude, this has been fun. I mean, I feel like I have about 25 more questions for you, but I think we'll probably have to end it here just because of time constraints on both sides. But we can do this again. I want to ask more questions about like more things in the world of skin and leakage. But I didn't, and that was a really good point on this leaky skin aspect of the leakage being an information processing thing, which I think is super important for people because I think people hear that term now, which I've heard multiple times, I guess, since you, and more thinking about it as sort of like leaky gut being the same kind of thing. So very interesting. So I mean, I asked the same question to everybody at the end of our podcast, and this is blanket question. You can answer any way you'd like. So what are the 3 ways that you think that we can live smarter, not harder? And this is because that's the name of our podcast, the Smarter Not Harder podcast. So what are 3 ways? I'm guessing it's jiu-jitsu 5 days a week, 24/7.
Excuse me, every day. No, I would say, I think first and foremost, obviously, first and foremost is community. Community is when you watch like Dan, whatever his name is, Blue Zones show, and if you read any research about like Loma Linda or anything like that, and you quickly realize these guys have nothing in common. They don't do anything that the other groups are doing.
Yep.
It's all one big BS, but there's one thing that they all have in common, which are like extremely strong communal community bonds. This is the essence. We can get into the will to live and where it resides in the brain, blah, 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 whatever. At the end of the day, just have foster a community which you want to contribute to and feel that you are getting reciprocated there. That's there. Habits, building habits, I think is like the easiest, the smartest, not hardest way to live life. As we spoke before the podcast, like I'm addicted to jiu-jitsu, and I don't need to have any conscious thought as far as like whether I'll go today or not. Obviously, the famous Kobe Bryant saying, I don't negotiate with myself. But really, I don't need to. There's nothing in my brain that says, yes. But habits are a derivative of a decision we made to create a habit. So whether it's a bad habit or a good habit, at some point we said, this is the decision I'm taking. We took this decision over and over and over again. So I would definitely describe as smarter, not harder.
I love that. Yeah, habits make it automatic, like you said, right? Which I think is great. You don't have to think about it. There's no thinking. Thinking always gets us in trouble. Cool. All right. Now, what's number 3?
The third thing I would say is avoid the taste of sweet. That's what I do. I now do not like the taste of sweet, and I think it's actually a pretty easy decision to make. Again, long term.
Okay, just because sugar is like cocaine, and you don't want to go back to that. Just kidding.
Exactly.
Which is like sugar. Sugar is cocaine basically for us. I'm not saying that you were ever a cocaine addict. I don't want to say that, but you weren't. But sugar is like cocaine for many people. It's as addicting. So
Yes, I agree, and I think cocaine is funny because it's the same color and stuff like that. But shows you how much I know about cocaine. But it's the same color and stuff like that. But I would say also that it is the wiring of our brain that is a problem there. It is the thing that our brain actually is designed to consume in excess, and even the taste of it itself can spike blood glucose levels, like without the actual
without even
molecule
actually being sugar as well. Yeah, totally. I understand. Alrighty, sir. So I have a question to you about sunscreen. Mm-hmm. Tell me why we need sunscreen, or why we don't need sunscreen, or why I should be putting sunscreen on my ears and not my cheeks or my nose instead of my forehead, or what's the deal here? I don't know. I have kids, we put sunscreen on them. And we care about what the ingredients are. So I want to know, like, should we use sunscreen? And then if we're going to use some kind of sunscreen, what do you recommend for kids, adults, anybody in between?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, we should use sunscreen if our end goal is obviously to have skin longevity or the youthful skin appearance. And the reason is everything comes back to the skin's ability to repair damage or repair mistakes. And that is how we can obviously summarize aging, right? Aging is a zero sum between damage and repair. Sorry, that's youth, right? Zero sum between aging and repair.
Right.
And everything that's not zero sum obviously is aging. So aside from the fact that the sun ages us, which I think is where everyone's kind of having the discussion, that's the floor. Does the sun do more damage than good? The problem is that UV gets translated in the skin to free radicals. That's what happens.
Right.
Free radicals increase oxidative burden, oxidative load, which then obviously drives damage, mistakes, etc. But what people don't consider is the fact that the sun or UV physically fuses parts of our DNA together, H letters that are adjacent. And what happens is that we're getting basically DNA mutation, or the inability to express DNA properly, which is called epigenetics, which then leads to not only damage, which is immediate, but really long-term damage, or the inability to act upon future damage. That's what we want to use sunscreen. We obviously, we can, if we wanted to, use our intelligence and understand when we are more susceptible to that. So I'll give you an example. Our son is apparently going to be an early riser, and he makes sure I am out of the house giving him our morning walk by like 6:30 a.m.
Sure.
I don't put any sunscreen on. And that's a complicated discussion, because one would argue that the prevalence of red and near infrared that my skin is exposed to can actually improve mitochondrial function, which then improves how I respond to sun later on during the day. Whereas if I'm just, exiting my house at 12, noon, right to the zenith of the sun, I'm going to be ill-prepared and even probably have been exposed to blue light that impedes mitochondrial function, and then go out to the sun. I'm going to have less of a positive result there, okay? As far as sunscreen specifically, the classical dermatologists don't like when you say, or I say, hey, physical sunscreen, which is called like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, is less toxic or less dangerous. But the truth to the matter is that the FDA has called to re-examine evidence or re-research what are called organic sunscreens, which is chemical sunscreens, because of their ability to absorb through the skin to our bloodstream and then even cross the blood-brain barrier. Some people will also hear that this happens with titanium dioxide. That's only if it's inhaled. So that's a whole other can of worms.
Okay. Gotcha.
You know what? If you're doing lines of anything, don't let it be your sunscreen.
Got it. Other options are better, maybe more effective. Got it. Okay.
More effective and definitely, yeah. Anyway, so that's as far as that. You did mention different areas, which is like super smart, because we do want some vitamin D synthesis, right?
Right. That's the question. Yeah.
We could definitely do better than our face and our arms, which are normally the areas that are exposed. And that is because these are areas that are inundated with more mitochondria disrupting agents, whether it is, by the way, things like pollution, or whether it is heavy metals, or whether it is glyphosates or blue light, artificial blue light, like I am. You can literally see where my face is being exposed to more of that light right now.
Sure.
Or EMFs even. I know this shirt doesn't really block EMF, but some clothing have, silver or things like that. So a lot of sports clothes have like silver in them or different materials that can mitigate some of it, especially people who care. There are underwear called lamps, obviously. So
Yep.
EMF also increases oxidative stress in our skin.
Right.
So all of those things are really translated to oxidative stress. We go outside, obviously, we are going to get more of that oxidative load. Some people might say, I'm reaching here, it's a reach. But I would say that research shows that sunscreen that is paired with antioxidants is doubly as effective.
Oral antioxidants or
no,
our skin antioxidants?
Topical antioxidants
Okay.
paired together with topical antioxidants has shown to be double as effective as far as like the ability to
damage goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that shows us why we want to decrease that oxidative load. So areas that are also bigger, like your back, your thighs, your abdomen, and chest, like your torso, these areas are not exposed to all these things that I talked about, because normally people are dressed and are not getting that much sun. And by the way, you're lighter normally there, which means you are better at converting UV to vitamin D.
Right. So when it comes to like a sunscreen like number, I totally understand what you mean. Like you want to protect the areas potentially that are getting most of the sun, right? Your face, your arms, et cetera, right? And that's where you have sunscreen potentially to decrease skin damage. What do you typically recommend as far as like, do you need to have a 50 billion sunscreen? Do you need to have like a 5? What is the sense here that you get, knowing the literature and knowing what you guys are doing in products? Like, what do you see? What do you see here?
So the funny thing, you don't even need any sense. I mean, I can tell you but the short answer is, I believe for the face, you need around 40.
Okay.
But aside from that, again, you want to look for a very high performing antioxidant or other like more unique ingredients like ectoin that we use. And you can find it with other brands that are less expensive, like Alastin has it. It's a brand sold by dermatologists. It's like a very affordable sunscreen. Okay. We just use like more of it. Okay. But
Got it.
Antioxidant and something that will mitigate oxidative stress.
Right.
And the reason we want that is because it tends to work better than just the number we're looking at.
Right. So in combination. Got it.
Yes,
okay.
but the number, by the way, denotes the amount of time you can be in the sun until you get burned.
Okay.
Obviously, that's super depends on your
totally depends on your skin
Fitzpatrick scale, stuff like that. But that is what 30, 40, 50 means. Okay.
I didn't even know that. That's funny.
No one knows that.
So it's like 30 minutes? Is it 30 minutes?
Yeah.
That's what it is?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
Interesting.
So normally we want 40 because the unit of time normally people will live within is 20 minutes.
Okay.
That's a whole different discussion. But I would like 2 units of that time. I don't like fractionated units of time. So.
No, so you're telling me that people live in 20-minute increments? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, people live in 20-minute increments. Yeah.
This is your theory, or is this proven out? Interesting. Okay.
No, this is there is a book called 10,000 Weeks, which is like an incredible book.
Yes.
And he's fantastic. Is the one that talks about it there. I think I've talked about it before with you. So he talks about it there, and that is where I adopted that basically.
Time management for mere mortals. I love it.
Yes.
Good stuff. Yeah, he's fantastic. Okay, so you're talking about antioxidants, and I just learned what the SPF actually means. So thank you for that. It only took me 44 years, but who's counting? So let's talk about antioxidants. So I know you talk a lot about vitamin C and the various forms that I think it's important because people don't realize there's some forms you want to put on your skin, some forms you want to put in your mouth. Some forms you probably want to snort. I don't know. I don't know if you know those. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a particular knowledge of snorting vitamin C. But let's talk about the skin. Like, what
Mhm.
do you want to put on your on your skin, and what don't you want to put on your skin?
So, normally, when people think about vitamin C, what literature will tell you is the name for vitamin C is ascorbic acid. But ascorbic acid is actually the outer layer of the vitamin C complex as it exists in nature. So, in nature, it is bound to minerals, and there are some other factors there as well. But the mineral part is like super important because it keeps it stable. Okay.
Okay.
That is where vitamin C becomes problematic, whether in forms that are related to topical or oral. Just oral, we have so much play there because it's really bad, surviving your digestive system.
Right.
But in your skin, you don't actually. So ascorbic acid is only the outer shell of that complex. It is extremely unstable and does not have the ability to remain stable, even if we got it to a stable state, remain stable when it interacts with other ingredients and your acid mantle. So the minute there is a pH change, it's not going to stay at its active form. It's actually going to become pro-oxidative.
Got
So
it.
it's actually
Okay.
going to drive oxidative stress in your cells, and it's going to drive a type of cellular death called ferroptosis, which is exciting of iron atoms.
Yeah, I mean, I've
And
heard this from an IV perspective. Like, I have oral vitamin C versus IV vitamin C. You have IV vitamin C over about 10 or maybe more, like about 20 or 25 grams. It becomes more of the oxidative. So you're saying there's a similar kind of pattern here when we're talking about what
Mhm.
you're describing.
So it's in topical, it's over 7% ascorbic acid, but we really want to look at like under 5% of
Got it.
ascorbic acid, and no one wants those numbers. Like no companies is competitive as far as their messaging, because the messaging right now in the skincare world is a more masculine messaging than it used to be. So
Okay.
everything is more, like more percentage, more of something. So that's as far as like ascorbic acid.
Okay.
Another thing about ascorbic acid is it is water soluble. Okay,
Yes.
so it's lipophobic. It doesn't penetrate through your skin barrier. There is use for those types of vitamin C's, but the problem is that it's touted to improve. So the main thing we want vitamin C for most of the time is the fact that it's a cofactor for collagen.
Right.
So it basically allows us to. So anyone who's heard about scurvy would know it's because of lack of vitamin C. So it's a connective
Right.
issue, tissue disorder. So we need vitamin C for that, especially in our skin. So we definitely want to consider like a fat soluble vitamin C. The best one around is THDA, THD ascorbate. There are other forms like sodium or calcium ascorbate.
Hmm.
They are just less effective. Okay, those are forms that are actually very good orally, but they're less effective topically. The other thing that we like about vitamin C is that neutralization of oxidative load in
Sure.
uppermost layers of the skin.
Okay.
If you are looking for that, and we definitely are looking for that when we formulate, we look at the best one is one that's called magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, but it can be sodium ascorbyl phosphate as well. Again, not as effective. Magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, or MAP vitamin C, but this, don't expect it to improve like collagen production or help with inhibiting the tyrosinase, which is like the thing that distributes or stimulates your pigment. That is not the vitamin C we'll choose for that. We choose it mainly for its kind of sun protective benefits.
Protective.
And by the way, it can give you like a 3 to 4 grade SPF. Like if you ask me, okay, equate it to SPF, it's around 3 to 4 on that grade.
Just with the vitamin C,
Yeah.
that product itself within the
Mm-hmm.
sunscreen or whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Or by itself. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Really interesting. So basically, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about sun protection versus collagen production. And
Yeah.
so, do you think of like different ways? Would you have a product that has both in there, or would it just be two different types of vitamin C, or is it usually one or the other kind of thing?
So skincare doesn't do emulsions very well.
Okay.
So essences are basically skincare's emulsions, okay? And it's not a very popular product. So normally skincare chooses either a lipid-based or lipid-heavy
Right.
or
Right.
a kind of water-heavy product.
Right.
Water-based products or aqueous products are going to be the ones that are going to have the lipophobic vitamin C's, and the fat soluble vitamin C's are going to go with things like creams
Makes sense.
or lipid based serums that will be able to contain it.
Speaking of creams, I have a
Yeah.
question about sperm on your face.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about.
For the listeners, I do not have sperm on my face currently.
Are you sure you haven't put it on this morning yet?
so I know why you're asking that. That's because of a product we use that's called Spermidine.
Yes. Yeah.
And Spermidine was discovered by Anthony van Leeuwenhoek, the guy who discovered also the microscope, because he was a boy. And the minute that you have a microscope, you know what you're going to be looking at. So
Indeed. Of
Spermidine,
course.
yeah, Spermidine is basically a fasting mimetic, is how most people like to educate on it, right?
Right.
It's, by the way, it's now derived from wheat germ. It's not derived from sperm. It exists in every cell in our body, and it is basically triggering a process called autophagy or autophagy. Depends what side of the road you drive on. And basically, it allows us to recycle malfunctioning cellular parts to new functioning ones, basically. But what I equate it to is like a chimney in renewal, okay? Especially when topical is concerned. You are not only allowing waste to get out, basically, but you're also stoking the fire of renewal. And again, it's a long discussion, but it improves not only our ability to basically recycle dead parts and stuff like that, but it also basically targets 9 out of the 12 hallmarks of aging. Therefore, we are also really ramping up renewal in general. Well, research that is not yet out, but what research is going to show, spoiler alert, is that it is also needed on a DNA expression level as far as autophagy is concerned. It means that it doesn't only play a part in triggering autophagy, adequate levels of it are a prerequisite in order for autophagy to happen. So if someone, once in a while in like YouTube comments, someone's going to say something like, fast for 72 hours once every 3 months and eat pomegranates, thank me later, something like that, instead of, whatever. But if spermidine at appropriate levels does not exist in that tissue, autophagy will not happen properly.
And I'm guessing that the skin gets depleted in such things faster because of its oxidative load. Then that's why you're putting sperm on people's faces.
Correct. Actually, not only that, any tissue, the higher cellular turnover a specific tissue has,
makes
the
sense.
more you're going to need that. Yeah. By the way, you're saying sperm, which is fine. But you don't know how correct you are because of, I think, the Kardashians or something like that. The most talked about procedure right now in a conference I attended, which is a facial plastic surgery conference, is injecting salmon sperm into people's faces.
No shit.
No, not shit. Sperm.
No sperm. No shit.
Yeah.
No sperm. Wow. So they're injecting the eggs themselves, or like the actual? No, actually the sperm itself. Actually, okay. Yeah. Wow. And what's the reason for this? What is
ribosomes and like different RNA, mRNA. But really what they are trying to do is to replenish those critical compounds that are needed, such as spermidine and other metabolites. The thing is that we know that most of them are easily replenishable.
Okay.
And through, by the way, tests like you guys are doing with Home Hope, like metabolomic tests, you could really address those on a much more fundamental level and really concentrate on things that the skin needs, especially, and not like, and not pay thousands of dollars per
sperm?
Facial sperm.
Facial salmon sperm. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I know when you told me when you guys were doing some of the R&D that it was a difficult process to find a way to make it not smell like sperm. Is that true?
That is 100% true. Yeah. I think that's one of the main reasons that other companies, which I know, as a matter of fact, it's over a year now for sure that there are a few like super large players. One of them is worth $173 billion. Wow. It's a chocolate company that is dabbling into supplements.
Okay.
But Anyway, one of the reasons I believe it's more difficult for them is that they're trying to use a synthetic version, which is called Pyrimidine, or like other patented version of Spermidine, which is isolated, which is synthetic. In general, like in other molecules like NAD, like CBD, we can go on and on and on. The body doesn't like things in isolation. And normally what we give the body is not what we get out of it at the end of the process. So trying to short circuit that process and give the body, I mean, the best example is the example of Tromune, where you're giving it, I'm blanking on the name of the cordyceps, but what you are getting out of is adenosine, right? Like you're not giving it adenosine because you want to get adenosine. So very similarly, what we see is that the major players, I'm talking about 80% of the repletion of the results is driven by the pre and post cursors of Spermidine, which is spermine, mainly spermine, to be honest, but the pre and post cursors.
So the precursors would be, if you're giving Spermidine as either a supplement or you're taking it on the skin, are those precursors also within the Spermidine as well? So it's not like it has to be converted in the body. The post, like you have pre-drugs and post-drugs, right? You have pre-drugs, like you typically have those before you go in the body and they get turned into a prodrug. But just so I understand the difference, is that what you mean?
Putrescine is a byproduct of Spermidine, or it is the waste material of Spermidine. Kind of, it's a polyamine, but it's the polyamine that then the body needs to kind of recycle back into Spermidine.
I see.
Gotcha. Having said that, they are really interchangeable as far as like how your body views that. So there is another one that's actually derived from citrus, from bergamot, that is more kind of hush as far as like, I would say like those pre-post cursors. But for the most part, these are the three major players, like Spermidine, Putrescine, and Spermine.
Nice, man. Well, that's super interesting. Amite, this has been fantastic, man. Thank you so much for spending time with me on the Smarter Not Harder podcast. I have one more question for you. It is a question we ask everybody at the end of our podcast, and it is this. Mm-hmm. What are 3 ways that anyone can live smarter, not harder? It is the name of our podcast. I know that you typically live this way, except when you get injured in jiu-jitsu. Maybe that's smarter, not harder some way, but you can describe that if you want. But what are the 3 ways you think that anybody can live smarter, not harder?
Wow, that's a great question. So I'll give one that is more general, is I think refine your relationship with dopamine. Live with a conscious idea around your relationship with dopamine. I think is like super important.
Yeah.
Invest in welcoming the future. It's coming, whether you like it or not, but technological future is coming, and part of living smarter, not harder is living. So if you're going to live into that future, you need to make sure you're prepared for it and not left behind. And the third one, let's say we are talking about skincare, I would go back to sunscreen. Like, you want to be like a super minimalist. Prevention is the best cure.
Love it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to get myself some sunscreen. I was batted away from it for so many years because I want to get enough, vitamin D and even, with, squinting and sunglasses and all those kinds of things and getting enough. But I appreciate your perspective here, man. And it's always great seeing you when we see you in person. It's always great listening to what you have to say. I learn a lot because I know nothing about the skin, that's for sure. So Amite, where can people learn about you, about your company? You have a fantastic company that we all like know and love here at Transcription. So tell us more about it. Tell us more about where we can find everything.
Yeah, so the best is obviously we have a podcast called that you are a frequent guest on, which is called the Biohacking Beauty podcast. This is where we really nerd out about things that would end up improving skin health. But really, if they can, listeners can understand from the fact that we bring you on, it's not necessarily about skin care. It is about longevity and how it reflects on skincare. So it's Biohacking Beauty podcast. We have a pretty lively Instagram page that is called young_goose_skincare. And if someone wants to see me do jujitsu and maybe read my long rants around longevity, my name is Amitai Eshel. That's how you can find me on Instagram. Yeah. And obviously our website. Yeah, Anastasia, my wife. It's all like you can do it all through the Young Goose Instagram. And our website is younggoose.com.
Easy. Amazing. Yeah. I hope I see you in person soon, but wishing you the best rest of your year, at least 2024 and 2025, all good things. Maybe you'll get an extra hour of sleep in the morning, but if Lev gets you up in the morning and you get a little bit of infrared, all the better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Take care, man. Good to see you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.